This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Ritesh Doshi, CEO of Spring Valley Coffee in Nairobi, Kenya. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much, those of you who have been listening for a long time. I so appreciate you tuning in week after week. I hope these episodes are continuing to be really useful to you. And those of you who have just joined up, welcome. Really glad to have you. And there's a lot of great content here in the Keys to the Shop library. You can go to keystotheshop.com/episodes, and you'll see a whole list of all the episodes we've got. And eventually I'm going to put the shift breaks on there as well. For some reason, I haven't put the shift breaks on. But yeah, I am really happy to have you along today. Now, if you haven't yet subscribed to the show, I would encourage you to do that. That way you're always updated with new episodes. And also, if this show has been helpful to you and you love what we do, would you please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or a review? That would really mean a lot. It helps the show get found by more people, and I'm trying to get up to 200 of those by the time the year is over. So it's about 2 months, and we'll see what happens. But thank you so much, those of you who have already done that. I want to let you know, too, that Keys to the Shop, on top of giving you this resource of the podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. So if you're looking to open a coffee shop and want to get started on the right foot, you're expanding and you need some work on your operations, or you are just wanting to take things to the next level, work through some challenges that you've got with your current business, really the sky's the limit. Coffee bar design, menu development, coaching, training, consultation, whatever you need, either in person or over the phone. So if that sounds interesting to you, please contact me at chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. We'll just hop on the phone and talk a little bit about how I might be able to help you in your coffee journey. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. This episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Now, Prima Coffee is one of the best specialty coffee equipment suppliers because they're not only passionate about curating the best coffee equipment from all over the world, but they're also passionate about making sure that you get the right equipment for your needs. And they're not just about equipping you with equipment, but also with the information you need to use that equipment well. So if you go to prima-coffee.com, you'll see the amazing selection, but also you'll see that they have a lot of resources, videos, and blogs, etc., that will help you maintain your grinders, maintain your espresso machines, even make better espresso and latte art. They're all about seeing you be successful in the specialty coffee world, and that's why I love working with them, and I think you will as well. So if you're in the market for commercial equipment for your cafe, reach out to them over at prima-coffee.com. This episode is also brought to you by the world's leader in plant-based performance beverages, and that is the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is top choice for a good reason. They test all of their products in the field with the feedback of professional baristas so that when it lands on your counter, that you're going to have a plant-based beverage that will perform the way you really need it to provide an excellent result for your customers. So it stands up to the heat from the steaming process, and it creates amazing texture for latte art. And also, it really balances the beverage. So it's not overwhelmingly tasting like almond or soy, but it helps focus the drink on the coffee. These are the kinds of things that your plant-based customers are looking for, whether they want the almond, soy, coconut, rice, oat, or hemp. There is something there for everybody, and I would really encourage you to go to their website over at pacificfoodservice.com and check them out for yourself. Get it in your store and try it. Have your baristas try it. I think you're really going to like it, and your customers will too. So again, that website for the best choice in plant-based performance beverages, pacificfoodservice.com. Okay, everyone. So today we are going to have a great conversation with Ritesh Doshi. Ritesh is the CEO of Spring Valley Coffee in Kenya. It's Kenya's oldest premium coffee roaster. It's a business he acquired in 2018. Having introduced the flat white to Kenya, Ritesh wanted to combine his passion for coffee and his sense of purpose with his need to control his own supply. Prior to Spring Valley Coffee, Ritesh founded Naked Pizza Kenya, a company he sold to Pizza Hut. And before becoming an entrepreneur, Ritesh worked in international finance in the US, Europe, and Middle East for various financial institutions. And in this conversation with Ritesh, we're going to be covering the history of Spring Valley Coffee, the story about how he entered the scene as the CEO and acquired the company back in 2018, and what has happened since then, since the company has expanded and is showcasing Kenya's best coffee to locals in Kenya. This is a really fascinating topic to me, especially because this is kind of a closed loop in the ecosystem where you have some of the world's best coffee being produced in Kenya, and then they're taking that coffee, roasting it at origin, and serving it back to the people in Kenya. And so there's this economic ecosystem that's really fruitful for the people of Kenya. And also they're adding value to the coffee there by roasting and then exporting that. So this kind of thing is happening more and more often at origin. They have their roastery, they have their coffee shops, they supply restaurants and hotels all across Kenya. And it's just a thriving business. And so we're going to dive into the details of that, as well as the culture of coffee in Kenya. And what you'll find in this conversation is that there's a huge emphasis on relationships and integrity. And Ritesh and his team have been able to accomplish a ton with Spring Valley Coffee. And so I hope that you find this just as fascinating as I did and encouraging as well as we seek to increase the sustainability of all in the value chain. Spring Valley Coffee is one of the prime examples of a company that's making a huge impact in that way. So without further ado from me, let's get right to my conversation. Here now is my interview with the CEO of Spring Valley Coffee in Kenya, Ritesh Doshi. Well, Ritesh, so glad to have you on the show. Welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Chris. How are you? It's great to be here.
Oh, great to have you again, and I'm doing great. This conversation is definitely going to be a fascinating one. And we talked a little bit before this interview, a little bit about your story. So I'm excited for people to hear the story of Spring Valley and your involvement in it. And so I think the first step is to just kind of get some background here on how this came about for you. Like, where did you come from in terms of like, how did you end up at Spring Valley, and what were you doing before this?
Sure. So, Chris, I think first and foremost, I was probably an entrepreneur stuck in a financier's body for a lot of my life. And in 2012, I moved back to Kenya to start kind of Kenya's premier pizza delivery business, which I sold in 2016. After selling that business, I actually live in the neighborhood called Spring Valley, which is a suburb of Nairobi. And after selling the last business, I just took a lot of time off and ended up spending a lot of time at my local coffee shop, which is Spring Valley Coffee. And there were two real reasons, two drivers for that. One was that they had one of my two favorite coffees in Nairobi, and they allowed my dogs. And I got to know the owners over time. We became friends. I mentored them a little bit as they were kind of going through different business challenges and growth. And over time, I asked them multiple times if they wanted an investor, to which they said no, but we still remained friends. And in early 2019, stars aligned, and, I offered to buy the business and they accepted. So, I ended up taking over the business from not doing anything after selling my last business for 20 months, from, asking if they wanted to sell the business, doing my due diligence, and taking over the business in a span of 6 weeks. And that's kind of where we are 2.5 years on.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, let's get into that a little bit though, because you sold the pizza business, you started and sold a pizza business. You're in hospitality already, and then you come in and become the CEO and owner of Spring Valley Coffee. So this is obviously something that's important to you. And hospitality and service-based industry seems to be your sweet spot, I guess. So where does that come from? And what was your reasoning for wanting to purchase a coffee company and not just start another a food brand, for example?
Well, it was funny. After I sold the last business, I actually swore to myself, I don't want to be in hospitality again. It was hard. It was a hard slog. And I think for the 22 months that I was kind of in between things, I'm like, I don't want to do it. And I almost switched my brain off to coffee from a hospitality or to anything in the hospitality space. And why this business was actually attractive wasn't for the hospitality side of it in terms of our own cafes, but it was more interesting from a production, manufacturing, being able to add value in Kenya, in our country, which unfortunately has a lot of youth unemployment, and being able to add value here. And I wanted to export a finished product. So the actual driver wasn't necessarily the hospitality side. I love chatting to people. I would always meet people for a coffee, either here or at one of my other favorite coffee shops in Nairobi. But the drive didn't come from a hospitality perspective. It came from a love of coffee and wanting to actually doing something that had a dual purpose of both profit and purpose.
Sure. So how long had Spring Valley been in operation before you had come along?
Yeah, so Spring Valley had been in operation since 2009. It was originally kind of called Kahawa Corner. Kahawa means coffee in Swahili. And it was a neighborhood coffee shop and bakery. And it came about because the original founder, he used to make the Hessian sacks, which green coffee come in. And in 2008, unfortunately, it was a terrible crop here. There weren't great prices for coffee, and the farmers couldn't pay them for the sacks. So they came and dropped off, a bunch of coffee, and they told him that there's an opportunity in roasted coffee. He then went and completed a roasting course in London, bought his first roaster, and in early 2009, literally started roasting coffee and giving it to friends of his. And then he ended up giving that coffee to friends of his. Some of them owned hotels, restaurants, cafes. And the business really shifted its focus to providing coffee to those places as well as making a little bit for its own cafe. And what's interesting is during that time, from 2011 till about 2014, our little roastery, what is now our little roastery, was the birthplace of 3 other Kenyan brands of coffee, which is actually a really nice part of history to be a part of. So in 2016, his sons came back, and one of them was trained as a barista and started making coffee for their customers. And the other one was selling coffee to hotels, restaurants, and cafes. And that's really kind of how the business came about. So there's one son running the front of house, one son running the production. And it was a little family-run operation, which made great coffee. And over time, as I got to know the boys, I actually asked them, hey, why is your coffee so good? What's the secret? And it was actually quite simple. They said everybody else exports the best stuff, and we keep it here because we want to drink the best stuff. And that's why I loved it, and that's why a lot of the regulars who were there every day loved it. And that really was the secret recipe.
Very interesting. And so they were running, obviously it was a successful venture, right?
Absolutely. It was a successful but a small venture, and they renamed it from Kahawa Corner, and at some point it rebranded to Spring Valley Artisan Coffee. And when I took over in March 2018, we dropped the word artisan simply because, we're based in Spring Valley. So it's it's a nod to our deep roots in the community here and the neighborhood in which we lie, which historically, if you go back to colonial times, was actually renowned for its coffee estates. So it really was a small family-run operation. If you go back historically, their father founded it. Their mom used to bake the pastries. The 2 sons then took over. And what's beautiful is our roasting team today, the 3 roasters that we have today, have been there from day one. It's the same roasting team that has been in place from the beginning.
Oh, wow. That's really something. And so they're keeping the best coffees for themselves so that they can serve it to their customers in Kenya. And I know that, traditionally speaking, Kenya consumes more tea than coffee. And I wonder what that experience, how that business handled that disparity, I guess, because here you have a successful business selling the best locally grown coffees. How did that demand grow, and what was that like when you took over?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things. I mean, as you said, Kenya is largely a tea drinking country when you think about, hot beverages. And that comes from our colonial history of being a British colony. And coffee, as much as we are relatively, and over the years have been a large producer, that's obviously been diminishing over the last couple of years. But as a major producer of high quality coffee, most of that has been exported. And I think what has really shifted, part of this is timing, part of this is luck. But you have a lot more people returning to Kenya having lived, worked, studied abroad. You have a large expatriate community. And you have a lot more people that, as a middle class grows, are becoming more affluent. They're appreciating high quality food, great wine, and great coffee. And I think people aren't really settling for the mediocre coffee that's been in the market traditionally. I think also if you go back to Kenya historically, growing up here, the word Nescafe and coffee were interchangeable. And sometimes even when you get out to rural Kenya and you order a coffee, they're like, oh, you'd like a Nescafe. Is that with or without milk? So I think the concept of quality coffee is a relatively new phenomenon that's really happened in the last 10 or 11 years.
And Spring Valley seems to be kind of front and center in that movement to get people familiar and with that product and make it just a household name, specialty coffee that is a household name, just like Nescafe.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think hats off to Dormans. Dormans is Kenya's oldest coffee roaster. They've been around for 60 years. And Mrs. Dorman, who started that company, really started that so that Kenyans could appreciate and enjoy high quality coffee in Kenya. And that was, over 60 years ago. And then Java House came along about 30 years ago and introduced people to coffee through their own cafes. And they really built that out and really introduced people to what coffee is. But that specialty coffee or the premium quality coffee movement really began happening, like I said, now about 11 years ago. And Spring Valley was very much at the forefront of that. And I'm incredibly honored and privileged and frankly very lucky to have been able to inherit a business that's so rich in history of the coffee industry. And like I said, 3 other coffee brands that exist today in Kenya started their roots in our coffee roastery.
There's a lot of pressure. It's an honor, but also it's a lot of pressure to inherit that kind of legacy. And it makes me, want to ask you what your goals were when you took over this brand to, was it scaling? Was it simply continuing on the trajectory it was already on? What kind of goals did you have when you first took the helm?
Well, I think there were 2. One was I definitely didn't want to just run a little coffee shop and a little roastery. I saw opportunity. It was a fantastic product. And part of that I got to know over the years because every time I would travel abroad, I'd walk into the coffee shop and I'd buy up all the coffee that was on the shelves to take as gifts, whether I was traveling to the US or to Europe or to Asia. And, as a business, they were continually stocking out. And I don't think that was anybody's fault. I think, the guys that were running the business that till today, by the way, are still my partners. They're not actively involved in the business. But they still remain my partners because it's really important to me that we come from such a rich legacy. And it's important that we maintain that on a going forward basis. But, I saw an opportunity. There's a great product. And there was a lot of room to improve it. And my last business I built from the ground up. And I said, is there an opportunity to take this business and do something really great with it and really showcase the best in what Kenya has to offer? So when I bought the business, I really saw the big opportunity as let's take Kenya's best coffee and let's export it. Let's roast it here and take it to the world. And at that point, when we took over, we had the roastery. There was a small cafe at the front. There was the lease signed for a second location that I wasn't sure I really even wanted to be in. And I'm glad that, that we stayed in that space because that helped us showcase our coffee even further, led to a third location, which then led to a 4th location at one of our airports. And, we're currently building location number 5 outside of Nairobi in a town called Nanyuki, which is actually in the highlands of Kenya where a lot of our coffee actually comes from. So we've gone from kind of coffee country of origin and we're actually putting in a specialty coffee shop in the region of origin within that country, which I really feel may be a first. Well, definitely is a first in Kenya, but maybe a first in this part of the world. And in fact, earlier today, I just negotiated and signed up our 6th location. So we should build 2 more before year end, which I'm super excited about.
Wow. Well, congratulations. When you take a look at the scaling that you're just describing, it seems like so much. And I wonder about operationally, what are the challenges involved in pursuing these goals and the benefits to the people involved in these operations? I mean, on the face of it, it seems that this just creates more demand for great coffee from farmers and they get the benefit and you can employ more people. But I'm sure that this kind of scale is not free from challenge. So what were some of the challenges and are they right now and how are you addressing them?
Sure. So when I took over the business, there were 7 employees. We had a roasting team of 3. We had 3 baristas at the main cafe and we had a cleaner. And today we're 30 people in the organization. So we've grown, more than 4 times from a team perspective. And what I'm really proud of is that the 3 roasters who were here at the beginning have continued to be part of that journey. And they're really integral to what we do. So for me is really creating employment, not just talking about it, but having that impact directly is really important to me. But I think as you go beyond that, with rising unemployment in our country, youth unemployment under the age of 30 is crazy. It's over 25%. Those are the official numbers. It's perhaps higher than that. Very few people going back to the agricultural highlands that do create a lot of employment opportunities. And for me, I think running a profitable business is important, but life has to have more than just a profit as the only purpose. And I fundamentally believe that, there is enough for everybody. And that's not even just about paying farmers what people call a fair or fair trade price. It's about paying an ethical price. And to me, what does that mean? That means that they get the right price for their product. It means that they can pay for their inputs. It means that they can, pay their loans. It means that they can send their kids to school. And what's been interesting about that is, we've diversified from originally just having the 2 coffees that we started, which was a dark and a medium roast, to actually showcasing coffees from all across the country. Some from small farms, some from big farms, some from 3rd generation farms, which have been rehabilitated by a farmer that's taken that over from his grandfather. And those are really the heartwarming stories that really kind of, play to my heart.
Where did you turn the corner in terms of building the business from its original just 7 people to where it is now? Like, where in that process did you start to see the impact really in the lives of the farmers, where you started to hear the stories like, we are able to purchase this equipment, or we are able to employ this a couple more people on the farm? Or where did you see that first sign that this is something that we need to keep growing because obviously it's making a difference?
The example that I love to give about that is the Rongo Farmers Cooperative that we work with. Now, this is, a small group of farmers. There are about 35 farmers, not farming a huge amount of land. But they were introduced to me by a Swiss foundation, who had initially helped them kind of get up and running, funded them to learn some permaculture farming techniques that are great for the soil. You unfortunately don't have kind of certified organic coffee in Kenya because of our water and our water table, but they're the closest that you'd get to it. And unfortunately, they had worked with other people in the past that were either not paying a fair price for their coffee, and they were introduced to us. And they came in to see me and they said, hey, we make this coffee. They brought it along. We sampled it. It was a fantastic coffee. And when I asked them what price they were getting paid, I think my jaw must have hit the table, because they were clearly being taken advantage of, because I know what the roasted price of that coffee was in the market. And we actually said, hold on, we really need you guys to stop selling to those people. We will buy all your coffee. And I didn't know what that meant at that point. But we bought all of their coffee that we considered kind of specialty or premium grade. And we bought all of that, but we said to them, bring us everything else. And they brought us everything that wasn't of that quality, and we separated it, we sorted it, and we roasted the other stuff for them. We ground it for them. We packed it for them in kind of, very simple packaging, so they could sell that back into their local community. So it was an additional source of income, but we were able to sell them the premium coffee. We were able to sell their premium coffee in our cafes through the resellers that we sell through, and really pay them a fantastic price. And we ended up paying them 2.5 times more. And what's been interesting is I said to them at the time, if you guys keep making coffee at this quality, I will buy your entire stock. Now, what's been interesting is that's a double-edged sword, because we paid them a great price, their yield has gone up. I've seen their yield go up 4 times over the last 2 years. And we're literally just about to buy the 5th lot. And what's interesting about that is, despite COVID, despite demand being a lot slower than we'd expected, we made that commitment. And we actually bought their last lot just as COVID hit. And it was important for us to honor that commitment. And while it is still a significant amount of money to pay for green coffee, it's even more significant to those farmers. And for them to have not gotten paid just because demand wasn't there isn't really their fault. And I think it's really important for us to kind of stick to our word and really honor what we said to them. And so we bought that coffee. We still have some in stock from earlier this year. We're just about to buy another lot from them. And it's our job and our responsibility to create that demand, whether that's to our own cafes, whether that's to our resellers, whether that's turning this into our Christmas blend, whether that's exporting this to some of the markets we export to. It's really important that we continue to honor the commitments that we made to them. And for them to see their yield go up, I've seen how much we paid them, and we're still paying them a great price for coffee. We're just paying them 4 times more because they're producing 4 times more. And that's incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that correlation between the yield and being able to, having paid them more is something I think a lot of people should take note of. And, when you're talking about now you have to pay them more because their yield is going up and your promise is still a promise, that pressure to scale the business or the necessity to scale the business to provide that demand. How do you determine the different avenues that need to be tweaked to scale in order to make good on those promises and to continue making those types of promises?
I think it really depends. We have kind of four different sides to our business. Obviously, our heart and soul was always in the supply of coffee to hotels, restaurants, and cafes, which pre-COVID was 50% of our business. And obviously, we're now operating in a new world order. And then we run our own cafes, and our own cafes are a great place for us, not just make incredible and craft incredible beverages, but to really showcase the best of Kenya's regional coffees. Whether those are coffees that come up from Kipkelion, which is near Iten, where all the elite Kenyan runners train, or the Rongo coffee I talk about, which comes from South Nyanza. And literally earlier today, I was with another guy who owns a coffee business, and he goes, "I didn't even know you could grow coffee in South Nyanza." And he's like, "And I'm from there." And I'm like, "That's because we buy all of it." So you don't even find it in the market. And we were the first people to roast a naturals coffee in Kenya. There are people that grow and mill and process coffee in a natural way, but most of it, because it's so premium, gets exported. And we're fortunate enough to have been the first people to roast a naturals coffee here. And I think you're right. The onus is on us to showcase that product. And as much as very, very early on, I wasn't really sure about wanting to be in the retail side of our business, that allows us to showcase the best of what we have to offer. It builds the brand. And through that, we're able to supply coffee, not just to hotels, restaurants, and cafes, but through an increasing number of supermarkets and other resellers, obviously on our own website as well. And then to slowly kind of build demand into an export business. And some of that in the US and in Europe and in Canada has really given us an opportunity to showcase the best of what that has to offer. And if we continue to build that demand, we can continue to source even more incredible, interesting coffees from both small and large farms and kind of take that out, not just to Kenya, but to the world.
How did your past experience in business prepare you for this role in specifically what you're currently doing with Spring Valley?
Really good question. I think the first thing was to really know what I didn't know, which was a lot about coffee. The only thing I knew about coffee is what I really liked about it and what I didn't. But the most important thing for me was actually having the right people around me. I think in my last business, I didn't have all the right people in the right seats, and I didn't have the right support structure and the right leadership team. And we're still not there yet. Today, we're building it, but we have a leadership team today. And we have a great number of people in our organization that, really buy into our culture, that buy into our values. And for me, the proof was really in the pudding when COVID hit. We made a commitment to everybody to say, we're not going to let anybody go. It's going to get tough, but let's all get through this together. And, I'm really grateful because everybody agreed to a 25% pay cut for a couple of months, but we were able to get everybody back to normal in July, which is phenomenal. But the team worked incredibly hard. And we're on track to actually even pay people back for the 3 months they took a haircut on salary for before year end, which is really important to me because everybody has a role to play in an organization. I feel that we have the right people. And I think in the past, and in my past business experience, we may have hired people just to fill seats. And while culture was important, it wasn't the driver. And now we hire for culture. We believe we can teach you the technical skills. We can teach you hospitality. We can teach you how to make coffee. We can teach you customer service. What we can't teach is attitude. What we can't teach is ethics. What we can't teach is culture. And we really, we hire for culture. We fire for culture. We ingrain people in our culture. And that's really what I think has really kept us going through this challenging time.
How would you describe the culture then? Like, what specifically are you using as a yardstick to measure that when you're looking at a person being right for the job or needing to adjust, the team a little bit? What's that standard?
I think the easiest one or the overarching one is really, just always do the right thing. And that could be for a customer, that could be for a colleague, or that could be for a supplier. I mean, the easy thing when the pandemic hit is to call all of our, coffee farmers and say, hey, we don't have demand right now. We can't pay you. But that's not the right thing to do. as everybody took a haircut in salary for a quarter, the right thing to do is for everyone to do that. Some people in senior management took even more than that. And it's just about doing the right thing. During this time, a lot of people that we supply coffee to didn't take calls, didn't answer us. We proactively called every supplier and said, listen, things are going to get tight, things are going to get thick. You have a commitment that we will pay you when things go back to normal, but we're going to ask for your support during this time. And we're really grateful because many of our suppliers did. And the ones that didn't, we stopped doing business with them. We found some of them might be the market leaders in what they do, if that's print or packaging or other things. But we moved to other people because they shared our values. And the other thing is, I think people see that way. If that happens all throughout the organization, that's also down at a barista level. If someone doesn't enjoy their coffee, or somebody goes, I want this coffee to be extra hot, at a lot of places, they would just kind of stick that, on the coffee machine. They'd re-steam it and serve it again. And we'll make that again. Whereas, if I look at our hospitality business, when COVID hit, many of our hotel, restaurant, and cafe partners had to shut down or did end up shutting down. And we proactively called all of them and said, hey guys, we know you're shut. We know that you're not open. Can we take your coffee back and give you a credit note for the coffee? Because our cafes are still open. It's the same coffee. So we can just serve that to our customers, and you have the pressure of one less supplier on your back. And everybody really appreciated that. And that wasn't because it was good for business. It wasn't because we get brownie points. It's because it was the right thing to do. And that's, really, really important. I'm proud to say that today we are on track to pay all of our suppliers back and pay all of our suppliers on time and back with what we'd agreed with them. And has it been a tough year? Absolutely. Has everybody made sacrifices? Of course. But it's really nice to be able to sleep at night knowing that you've done the right thing for your team, for your customers, and for your suppliers.
Wow. So integrity, it sounds like it's that cornerstone of your business. And it would be, I guess, tempting to scale like the way you are and cut corners. And I imagine this is something that, if you look long term at what you want to accomplish, you want to get there sooner. So there must have been times where doing the right thing might have been painful and even seemed like it was getting in the way of the kind of good goals that you had.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, we, as much as we're proud of living in a country of origin that grows some of the best coffee, I think living in an emerging market like this also has other challenges around bureaucracy. And there are times where we have been challenged by government authorities, bureaucrats. We unfortunately, because of some of the equipment that we use, have to import our coffee machines, our roasters, our grinders, and other things. And those things have been held up, at the port, at airports, by customs, where people ask for bribes and things, and we just don't do it. We're like, actually, just hold on to it. We don't need it that badly. And it's difficult. But I think when they realize the first time and the second time that we're not going to pay them a bribe, we're playing the long game, and they realize we're not going to play that game. The next time we get something in, they will just let it go through because they know we've done everything by the book. So yes, it's a bit more time consuming. Yes, it's a bit more costly to do it by the book, but long term, it actually makes for good business. And yeah, there are times where, we've been super close to running out of packaging because somebody's sitting on our packaging at the port waiting for, someone to pay someone to get it released, and we just won't do it. And a point came very early on in the business where we did run out of packaging, and for a couple of days, literally had to sell people coffee in brown paper bags. And I still remember that day. But we explained to customers, this is why, and I think people appreciate that.
So yeah, challenging the status quo, I guess.
One of the other things around challenging the status quo is, unfortunately, the way the Kenyan coffee market and the structure and the laws are, is that it is incredibly bureaucratic and not necessarily fair to every player in the value chain. And all the farmers have to take their coffee to a mill. The mill has to sell it to a marketing agent. The marketing agent has to present to auction. And then we have one of, a handful of dealers permits where we're able to buy that coffee at auction. And even if we establish a direct relationship, in some cases, we're able to buy that directly because we have a corresponding export order. But in other cases, even though we built the relationship with the farmer, even though we've kind of helped them get to a certain point, we still have to buy that at auction. And we know that the farmer's not getting the full price, and they know that as well. So what we sometimes try and do is we'll try and negotiate a price with the farmer and then kind of backward calculate, because we know what everybody else in the value chain is making, so that they actually get the right price for their coffee.
Well, let's go into the details of that a little bit. Like, how do you go about sourcing and selecting your coffees? Because now it seems like you've maybe already done some homework and relationship building with a farmer, but they say, well, see you at auction because I'd like to sell it to you now, and you have to meet us there. But what goes in to selecting a farmer to work with, a coffee to buy, and then getting it in?
So there's a couple of different things. I mean, the story that I love to tell is, a friend of mine who runs an incredibly, successful and is Kenya's perhaps favorite, French patisserie, is a customer. But before he was a customer, he was a friend of mine before I bought this business. And when I was buying the business, he was one of the references that I called. And I called him and I said, hey, Jan, I'm thinking about buying this business. What do you think? And he said to me, Ritesh, I've known you for a long time. I love you. I'm going to give you one piece of advice. He goes, I know you're going to change the brand and you're going to change the colors and you're going to grow this business. He goes, please don't change the coffee. So as soon as I bought the business, I literally signed long-term contracts with the suppliers of our two main coffees, which is our dark roast for espresso machines and our medium roast for filter machines and French presses. So, I didn't want to fix something that wasn't broken. So that was the first thing that we did. And literally just committed to buying significant amounts of their stock. And we have great partners that help us in terms of storage, in terms of logistics, and making sure that value chain stays exactly where it is. What got really interesting is actually some of the regional blends and how we came about finding those. And all of those have actually come through a story. Our first regional blend was a women's coffee that we ended up calling Zawadi. And that came to us through a customer who, she used to come to the coffee shop. She worked for Fair Trade International. She said, hey, there's this coffee, this women's cooperative, grows this coffee. They're the first Fair Trade certified women-only cooperative growing coffee in Africa. Why don't you support them? And I said, that's great. She introduced me. We went and had a meeting with the leaders of that cooperative. We agreed a price. And then I get an invoice from kind of an intermediate marketing agent saying, hey, you can buy the coffee. This is the price. And it really upset me because at that point, I didn't fully understand the legalities and the logistics of having multiple people in the value chain. And I said, but this is the price I want to make sure the farmers get. And the marketing agent said, that's the price, but that price has to get paid to me and I pay the farmer. And I almost ended up not buying that coffee. And it wasn't a significant amount. It was maybe a couple of tons at that point. But I remember sitting across the table from the chairperson of the cooperative saying, I will buy this much coffee from you. So I didn't want to let them down because they were expecting that income. But it really made me understand that there are a lot of players with vested interests in the status quo. And, there are a lot of people that want to see that change, but there are a lot of people that don't. So we continue to support that cooperative. We've agreed what price we're willing to pay for that coffee. And we've said if there's anything else that the other intermediaries need to make, that's fine. We're happy to top it up. But I want to make sure the right price gets paid to the ultimate farmer. And that was interesting because that was an introduction. The second one, which again, I mentioned Rongo earlier, an old friend of mine from school introduced me to the Rongo farmers and the leader of their group. And, it was interesting because she introduced us. She's based in Switzerland and said, hey, we'd help fund these guys to teach them the techniques that they use for farming, but they need a route to market. Can you work with them? And they're so small that they to date are not even formally registered. We're helping them go through the registration process. And we bought their coffee for 3 seasons. And then this past season, we got a bit of a slap on the wrist from the regulator saying, hey, they're not registered. You can't buy their coffee. And my conversation, and look, and they're great people, at the coffee board and the coffee director. And they said, hey, Ritesh, listen, you need to get these guys registered, get them bringing the coffee in through the correct way. I said, absolutely. Let's get them doing that. But the reality of it is, if we don't buy their coffee today, they're not going to have anything to eat 6 weeks from now. So we're buying that coffee. We'll take the slap on the wrist. We'll do whatever has to be done to make that work. But the farmers need to get paid for their coffee. And these are the guys that are the only people that are growing permaculture-driven coffee in the entire country. And it's grown under the shade of avocado trees next to pineapples. And the coffee's phenomenal. It's my favorite. It's actually what I have every morning when I have a French press at the office. So it really is, how people come to us. And then the third regional coffee that we have, it comes from an estate in Nyeri. It's a 3rd generation farmer. He took over from his grandfather, rehabilitated their farm. And we're using that as part of our conservation coffee. And that introduction was made by our conservation foundation partners in Germany. So for us, it's really, if someone's tried a great coffee, if someone's experienced a great coffee, we'll either seek it out in market What's great about Kenyan, what the coffee board and the coffee director have done is traceability is fantastic. You can literally trace a bag of coffee down to the mill that it was milled at, back to the farm that originally came from. So we have a lot of great technology today. If you think about blockchain or you think about other ways to track it, but Kenya's traditional ways through numbers and letters of tracking coffee back to the mill, back to the week that it came from is actually fantastic. So that traceability is really good and helps us find some of the best coffees in the country.
Wow. So it sounds like a lot of this was a result of just relationships over time. And you're able to work with people and develop those relationships further. And then I guess my next question is, when you're developing these relationships and committing to buying this coffee, how does the quality control work in terms of, I imagine you're one of the largest purchasers of their coffee, or in some cases the only one. And so there has to be some kind of a feedback mechanism to help them improve what they're growing and year over year. So what does that look like from a quality control perspective?
We're really fortunate. We have a panel of cuppers, and some of those are official like Q graders, the barista champions, they're SCA trainers. And then we have people that are just really passionate about coffee, just customers. And they all give us advice, input, and feedback from a finished product. But from a green coffee perspective, anything that comes in, we obviously we don't have a lab on site, but there's a lab that we work with that does all of our quality control and our testing. And then if our roasters find any challenges with the coffee, we keep that aside and we share that with the farmer. And the example that I gave of the Rongo guys and their yield going up 4 times, they're not making 4 times more coffee, or they're not growing 4 times more coffee. They're growing 4 times more coffee that we can use. They were probably growing a similar quantity, but a lot more of that was lower grade. And with feedback in terms of letting the cherry ripen that little bit more, but not too much more. Or what are you doing? What are the other inputs that you're working with? What else are you growing around that? We're not the experts. And sometimes it's about connecting farmers to people that really are, agro experts. But from a finished product perspective, we know exactly what we want. And we're happy to keep aside what ideal looks like and what less than ideal looks like. And they know that we'll pay a certain price for that ideal coffee. And for the less than ideal stuff, sure, we'll roast it for them. We'll give it back to them. But they're not going to be able to achieve the same amount of value in the time frame that they might like. And I think people really understand and appreciate that.
So it seems like offering that kind of feedback, and then your distinction you made there, which is a critical one, that they were growing 4 times as much coffee as you could use for the standards you had. It seems like that would also then make them more attractive to other buyers of their coffee, not just you.
Absolutely. In fact, the Rongo guys, we're working with Caleb and his team at the moment to actually help them get registered so they can go directly to auction. And the reality of it is, I would love to buy all of their coffee, but if I don't have that much demand, they should be able to get top dollar for that coffee, either domestically or internationally. So the intention is absolutely for them to increase their yield. And if it means that, we have the opportunity to showcase that and help them build that brand, fantastic. We've played our part in that value addition. But they've done a lot of that hard work as well, which is actually growing and tending to that coffee over many, many seasons.
Sure. And so farmers oftentimes don't have those kinds of, they don't have access to the kind of feedback that a coffee shop and a roastery and a lab would be able to give them. And so further emphasizing the importance of having in country or in a producing country, these types of outlets like a coffee shop serving local coffee and roasting local coffee, so that feedback is very accurate. Like the potential of the green coffee is, what it is because you've got these customers that are showing you. So it seems like this really, this win-win.
I mean, I'd like to think so. And I think the proof is really in the pudding, because if they're able to achieve a higher price for their coffee in the open market, then that is ultimately the right outcome.
So when we take a look at what you've been able to accomplish over the years with Spring Valley, what kind of impact or what kind of inspiration have you been to others who want to make an impact on the local economy through, just highlighting what Kenya has to offer? Since Spring Valley seems like a really great inspiration and model, who has, sort of taken up a project or started a business as a result of this?
I mean, I wouldn't dare to say that we've been an inspiration to anybody, but I would like to think that some of our views or perspectives or the way that we do business has at least, given people a view that there is an alternative. I mean, an example that I always like to give is it's far more cost effective. And people always say to us, hey, why don't you move to a more industrial area where you can have a bigger location where you can produce more efficiently, store more efficiently, where you're not having to kind of go to the other warehouse to pick up coffee on a weekly or sometimes multiple times a week basis. But for me, I mean, we're in Spring Valley. We were born here as an organization. We are deeply rooted in the community, right? We get our food from the lady that makes food around the corner. We buy flowers from the florist for our office and our coffee shop that's outside our coffee shop. And people come in and have a coffee and they pop into the greengrocers next door, or they pop into the butchery 2 doors down. And we're a part of the community. And I think it's easy to be completely driven solely by profit. And profit's important, don't get me wrong. I think that's what allows you to be sustainable and scale. But I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I don't think it can be the only motivator. And for me, and the team at large, it's really about just what else are we doing? What else are we doing in addition to our day job? What else do we do around, in the neighborhoods that where the roasteries is one, but we have 3 other locations today. What are we doing in those areas? Who are we working with? Who are we supporting? And it's not charitable, but if we can use a local supplier, we'd much rather do that than, work with a larger company or a corporate. If we can use a local taxi driver, or use a local delivery guy, those are the people that we prefer to work with because we're deeply rooted in terms of what we do every day. And we are definitely saying we're definitely not the first, but we're seeing more and more businesses really think about that and being a part of their local community, wherever they're based, be it in a neighborhood, be it in a more industrial or more built up area, but really being a part of the community. And I think that's incredibly important.
What kind of structures do you have in place, and what kind of approach do you have towards managing all of these moving pieces so that they are there sustainably, like your business in all of its goals and all the people that it impacts? You mentioned, it needs to be profitable to be sustainable and to grow. So what do you think is the trick, or not trick, but what kind of systems are in place for you to manage all of this responsibly and make sure it's humming along and is able to scale well?
Well, I think the most important thing that my baristas will tell you is that I'm not allowed behind a coffee machine because we want to keep our customers. So that's probably rule number one. They're like, if they see me kind of walking back towards the counter, they're like, no, we'll make the coffee, boss. So I think that is definitely rule number one to keep people coming back. But in all seriousness, I'm a really big believer in rhythms, and that's rhythms of communication. That's rhythms of meetings. I'm surrounded by incredibly talented people in all parts of our business, whether that's in production, whether that's in operations, whether that's in finance, whether that's, on the design and marketing side. And for me, what keeps everybody aligned and doing what they need to do is quite simple. We have a daily huddle meeting every morning. It's at 8:53 every morning. It's for 5 minutes. Everybody gets between 30 and 45 seconds to talk about the most important thing they did yesterday, the most important thing they're doing today. And if they're stuck on something, can somebody help them? And that's the leadership team in the morning. And then everybody on the leadership team does the same thing with the various people. Some of them don't have people reporting to them. The people that obviously work in production and operations and our cafe business do. And they will then in turn have a very similar conversation with the people that work on their team. And then at the shop or the cafe level, the 2 or 3 people that work at that location will have a similar meeting as well. And it's important because we're able to just kind of communicate, and I really believe over-communicate quickly, but we're also able to bubble issues up to the surface relatively quickly. We don't have to go through large hierarchies. I used to be a micromanager, not just in this business, but I think because I'm a perfectionist. But I really learned over time, and back to maybe alluding to an earlier question you asked, is to really manage to my people. It's my job to lead my people. And it's their job to lead their people and to get their job done. So for me, the really important thing is I have a one-to-one with every single one of my direct reports every other week. And that's really important. It allows me to connect with them personally, professionally. It's sacrosanct time. That meeting never gets canceled. It may get moved because we may need to meet customers or suppliers, but it never gets canceled. And it's really important that it keeps me aligned with the team that reports directly to me. And then also coaching people that show promise. And that could be a barista. It could be somebody. An example that I give is, we got a young lady that joined us as a barista. She quickly became a senior barista and a cafe manager. And now she's our retail coordinator, coordinating the movement of all of our purchases and logistics between our 4 and soon to be 6 retail locations. And she started in the organization as a barista. And that's through coaching that she's had with people on the leadership team. And I think it really is about communicating and over communicating what we do. I think sometimes what I'm really, really bad at is starting things and then not necessarily getting them done. And I think one thing that I'm working on and my team is really holding me accountable to is finishing what we start. So perhaps do fewer things, but get them done. And I think that's incredibly important. And then we also have a culture. I'm a big believer that, yes, everyone needs a job description. There has to be structure. There has to be kind of, clarity on what people have to do. But I really believe that the magic happens when you color outside of the lines, when you transcend your formal role, when you step outside the boundaries of your department or area you work in. And that's where the magic really happens. And we've had, baristas come up with great ideas for production. We've had roasters walk by and be like, hey, why do we have so much of that thing in stock? Maybe we can buy less. And we've had the cleaner say, I think we can do this differently or better. And we've had everybody really contribute. And I think it really is giving people that space, that safety, that sense of belonging where they can really say anything. And that's not easy. That's not easy to build. We're still building it. We're building it every day. And I'm very, very fortunate that I'm surrounded by a team of people that buy into that and that buy into that way of work. We're also incredibly transparent, which may be unique in our business, and especially in our business in this part of the world, down to our revenue and our profitability. Everybody in our organization knows what that looks like.
That's incredible. And wonderful to hear about the one-on-ones and the kind of freedom that people have to contribute and the support that they get as professionals in the organization. And obviously, you're facilitating this as a value in the company, and other people are taking up that mantle as you bring on people that are on the same level as those values, and they take that up and they promote that to their direct reports. And it just seems this domino effect of values that really makes this impact. And I wonder what you would say here, as this would be my last question to you in our conversation. What advice, and I think you just gave a bunch of advice here, would you have for other owners who want to accomplish big things with their organizations, and maybe especially to those who are trying to take up a project like doing a roastery and coffee bar at origin?
There's a couple of things. I think one is I'm not a big fan of advice, because I think advice is incredibly subjective. It's very relevant at a particular point in time to a particular situation. But I'm always keen or very open to sharing my experiences, good or bad. So if I share an experience, someone can take something away or not. I'm very fortunate in that, earlier on in my business career, I felt very lonely at the top of my organization and really felt that I was the only leader there. And I joined an organization called the Entrepreneurs Organization, which for me, really put me with like-minded peers. And that was with entrepreneurs. And there are lots of organizations. There are guilds within the SCA, like the Roasters Guild or the Baristas Guild. But being surrounded by like-minded people where you can ask questions without fear of judgment, where you can bounce ideas without fear of ridicule, and be able to really, open up and be vulnerable. And I think as human beings, we're very guarded. We want to tell the nice side of our story. We want to have this well-curated life. But I don't know if that's truly authentic. And for me, it's get vulnerable, right? And I guess I call the phrase, get naked quick. Tell people kind of what it is, how it is. And I've always felt in the opportunities where I've been able to open up, and especially with the challenges that I face, there's always someone that has an experience to share or has faced a similar challenge or knows someone who's faced a similar challenge that has then been able to help me get through that. And I mean, I'm very open to sharing with both friends and competitors alike. Everyone may not share that mantra, and that's okay. But I truly believe in just being open, because you don't know what will come to you. And I truly believe that what's due to you will come to you. And the example I give is of the site that I mentioned that we negotiated earlier today. I've been looking in this particular neighborhood of Nairobi for perhaps 6 months for a location. And there was somebody who called me yesterday who I didn't know, who's a customer, asking for help on packaging. And I asked her where she lived, and she told me where she lived. And I said, hey, where do you think would be a great space for a coffee shop? And she said, actually, there's this space that's available. It's right here. You should go and check it out. And if I wasn't willing to get a little bit vulnerable with a customer to say, hey, I can't find a location in this part of town that I really want to be in, I would have never seen the opportunity. So I'm a big believer in just telling it as it is, and what will come will come.
Wise words. Yeah. And it's back to that getting outside the lines, outside the box. And, you have said this in lots of different ways throughout this whole conversation, through what you just said, and also with your adherence to integrity, even when in the face of challenge, it doesn't make sense, but it's just doing the right thing, and it's taking that step that seems like a little bit of a leap of faith. It has really, I don't want to say paid off, but it seems to have paid off for the business of Spring Valley Coffee, for you in your career. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Ritesh, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm so excited for the expansion of your business. How can people continue to learn more and interact with you in Spring Valley? Where can they learn more?
So, we're everything's on our website, springvalleycoffee.com. You can check us out on Instagram, Spring Valley Coffee. From our website, you can buy coffee and have it delivered to you. And what's exciting about that is on every bag, it'll tell you who roasted that bag of coffee. So it has our roaster's name on every single bag of coffee. And for all of our regional blends, tells you which estate it came from. We used to put the GPS coordinates on there. We don't do that anymore. We have people. No, because we actually had somebody walk into one of the farms trying to buy all the coffee, which was interesting. So we took the GPS coordinates off, but the estate names are there in most cases. But yeah, just check out our website. The story behind each one of our coffees is on there. There's a couple of videos on there, and that's evolving and changing every day. And yeah, I'd say watch this space. There's a couple of interesting things that will be happening kind of as we run up to the Christmas period. And definitely look out for our new cafe opening up in Nanyuki in Kenya, because it'll be the first specialty coffee shop, not just in a country of origin, but actually in the region of where that coffee is grown.
Wow. Congratulations again. And so great to have you on the show. Thank you, Ritesh.
No, Chris, thank you. Thanks for the engaging conversation. Thank you so much for all the questions. And I think one thing you asked and I perhaps didn't talk about was, people that want to build a coffee roastery in country of origin. And, for me, the one thing that someone said to me is, you can't do that. You can't roast to a global standard in Kenya or in a country of origin. And I think when you say to somebody with an entrepreneurial mindset that you can't, you absolutely can. And I fundamentally believe that there's perhaps more demand than everybody either is aware of or will allude to in those countries of origin. And I think it's super exciting to showcase the best of what your own country has to offer.
Be skeptical of the people who say you can't.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Ritesh.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. Ritesh obviously has such a passion for building relationships, doing the right thing, and in the face of challenges, making sure that their integrity is intact and that all the people that are involved are recognized, being treated well, and rewarded for their work. So this is a virtuous cycle that they have built over at Spring Valley Coffee, and I leave this conversation just encouraged at the work that's being done there. So a huge thank you to Ritesh for being on the show and sharing about Spring Valley Coffee and their culture and all that they're doing there in Kenya. We really appreciate your time and your insights here. So if you want more information about Spring Valley Coffee, just go to springvalleycoffee.com. You can buy their coffee right there on the website. I encourage you to do that. Learn more about the brand. Also, you can find them on Instagram. Their handle is Spring Valley Coffee. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this episode or any of our episodes, you can contact me at chris@keystotheshop.com. I would love to hear from you. That's also the email that you can use to inquire about Keys to the Shop Consulting. Again, that's chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, before we go here, I just want to let you know that tomorrow I'm going to be putting out a little bit of a bonus episode telling you some of the grossest cafe stories that have been submitted by listeners to Keys to the Shop and to followers on Instagram. There are some really cool stories that are kind of gross. Call it a Halloween special or whatever. But I thought it would be fun to do that. That's airing tomorrow as a bonus episode, so stay tuned for that. And that's the end of our show today. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening to the show. We're almost to 1 million downloads for Keys to the Shop, and that's just really fascinating to me. And really, I'm blessed to be able to do this and to have listeners like you in the audience. I really appreciate all of you tuning in, sharing these episodes, sending your feedback, and encouraging comments. It really means a lot. So I hope you have an amazing week. Thank you again. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.